When it comes to increasing like that overall really satisfying flavor of your dish, browning is really, really important. We talked about umami in another lesson and all the ingredients that you can use to add umami to a dish. We talked about caramelization, we talked about the Maillard reaction. But nothing is going to get you the same amount of flavor as actual browning, right? And so browning meat, browning your vegetables, like that brownness is flavor. Like that's the best flavor. That's gold. That's the stuff you want. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to brown meat. So got our little cooktop here, got our tongs and our spatula, got some cooking oil here. I'm going to put it in the pan. You generally want to wait for it to start to shimmer. This pan's already hot. I added it to the hot pan. You generally don't want to add oil to a cold pan and then heat it up. Alrighty, so our oil is hot. We're going to kind of move it around the pan a little bit. We're going to do this with chicken because I want you to be able to see what this browning looks like, and that's harder with dark meat. So we're going to add some just chunked chicken breasts. This is cut into little like 1-inch cubes. And it's really important to not crowd your pan because what happens is you really want like contact and browning. And if the meat is too close together in your pan, you'll end up steaming your meat and it won't brown as well. I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. And so we got our tongs. These are really important when it comes to browning because you want to like check your meat, but you don't want to like fuss it, right? So here's an interesting thing about browning. There's like a very fine line between browning and burning. And so it requires both patience, but also like vigilance, which is, they're two, diametrically opposed concepts. But what you want to do is you want to put your food in the pan and you want to let it sit and you want to not mess with it, which is kind of hard. But you also have to keep an eye on it because you don't want it to burn. And a really important factor with browning and burning is, I don't know if you can hear like this sizzling right now, but it's kind of like a low like sound. And the thing about meat or vegetables or pretty much anything like mushrooms that you're going to cook in a pan is what happens at first when you put it in the pan is all the water starts to boil off because there's a lot of water in food, right? And it hits the heat and that water starts to heat up and evaporate. And like you'll see, like some of this isn't smoke, this is all steam that's evaporating right now. Eventually that water is going to be gone. Once that water is gone, that's when caramelization starts. That's when the Maillard reaction starts. That's when burning starts. And so you'll notice when it goes from like this like lower sizzling sound to a more high-pitched sound, it'll go from shh to shh. Like that's burning. And it's funny because when you've been cooking long enough, like you'll hear that sound from across the kitchen and come running. So we've got our little bits of chicken here, and I'm gonna pick one up, and they're still sticking. And that's generally what happens, like things will stick when they're not done browning yet. So what you wanna do is you wanna throw your food in, maybe move it around a little bit with the oil, and the food will continue to stick until it's ready to let go. So if you have to like yank on it and pull on it, it's not done browning yet. Give it a second. So we're gonna let these brown, and when they're done, I'm gonna show you what it looks like. Okay, so this chicken's been browning a little while now, and I wanna show you what it looks like. So I'm gonna pick up this piece right here, and you see how it's got like a nice brown flavor here, or nice brown coloring? You wanna get it a little darker than that. And you wanna make sure you're doing this on a really high heat pan, not like searing crazy hot, but like pretty warm, like medium to medium, high, because what you want to do is you want to cook the outside of the meat really quickly so that it browns really quickly. And one thing I want you to notice, like if you notice that it's cooking too fast and it's starting to burn, what you can do is you can actually just pick the pan up and remove it from the heat. So this is why it's good to have like a hot pad, or if you're doing it on like a stove, you can just move it to like a burner that's not on, because there's really no way you can stop burning just by fussing with the food. You can flip it over, but that means the pan's really hot and what it needs is a break. So just pick it up, move it off the burner, and it will like slow down the heat pretty quickly. Also, it's important to know that the kind of pan you use is really important. So cast iron pan works really good. This is a heavy bottom stainless steel pan. This works really good. You can't do this in a nonstick pan because the whole point of browning is to stick, right? And if you're doing it in a nonstick pan, like it'll brown, but it's not the same. You don't get that like luscious, like browning Maillard reaction flavor. It's just not the same. Alrighty, our chicken's been browning for a little while now, and you're gonna see this is the goal. You see that nice, beautiful golden brown color? That is well browned. You see this? That's actually not so well browned. That's okay. That's better than nothing. But like you want like this. That's flavor. This is like almost flavor. This here is like no flavor at all. What we're gonna do is we're gonna let this cook a little bit longer so that they finish browning. Okay, now my chicken is fully browned, and as you can see here, like they've got nice little brownie bits, and I've pulled them out of my pan with my tongs. Tongs are amazing for working with little pieces of meat because they're hard to like pick up with a spatula. Tongs are like a game changer. So I've taken all my meat out, and what we've got now is a little bit of oil and the fond. This browning is freaking gold. You want to hold on to it. This is the whole reason that we're doing this exercise. And so it doesn't really do us any good on the bottom of the pan. So then how do we get it out of the pan and onto our food? We deglaze. So this is a bottle of white wine. What you do, this is a hot pan. Pan has to be hot, just as hot as it was when the meat was in there. So don't take your meat out and then turn it off. But this is also the reason that you want to keep your like deglazing liquid right there, because you don't want to have to like run around searching for it, in which case your fond will burn. And once it's burnt, there's no saving it. You're out of luck. So we're going to add the wine, and it's going to splatter. And that's why we wear an apron, because like whenever you're working with oil, even the meat splatters. But once you add like a liquid to hot oil, like it gets everywhere, and this will ruin your clothes. It's not coming out. So just do yourself a favor. Unless you're like cooking in your old crappy jammies that you don't like wear an apron. So now we're going to add the wine, and you're going to hear it splatter. And you want a good 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup, depending on how much meat you've been cooking. And so now you can see it's been, I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. You can see that it's already picking up some of the fond, right? So all that brown goodness is now in the cooking liquid, which is pretty amazing. That means now that this cooking liquid, this wine, is infused with all that amazing flavor. And what we're going to do is we're going to let the wine cook off a little bit, because we want some of that alcohol to burn off. We don't want it to just taste like wine and chicken. We want it to actually taste mostly like chicken, and then a little bit of acid from the wine. So we're going to let this cook and boil. And what you can do at this point, if you want to make a pan sauce, is you can just add a little bit of a slurry, which is cornstarch mixed with water, or you can add a beurre mani, which is butter mixed with flour. But we're going to go over that in a later lesson. So for now, we're just going to deal with the fond and make a very simple pan sauce, which is nothing but like deglazing liquid and fond. And actually, instead of wine, you could even just use water. You can use apple juice. You can use any liquid you want that tastes good. Alrighty. We've got this going, and it's about done. You can see like a lot of the wine has evaporated, and what's left is basically the essence of the meat. And you see these little bits here. These are like little tiny bits where the chicken's stuck. You can actually sieve those out if you want, or just like scoop them out and toss them. Though you don't need to. It's not that big a deal. We're not cooking for the French Laundry, right? Alrighty, this is done. We're going to turn off our stove, and I'll show you what to do with it next. We've got our very simple pan sauce done. It's just the fond from the bottom of the pan and white wine. So you don't need to add any salt to it because you already seasoned your meat ahead of time, right? Right? So if your meat is well seasoned, you shouldn't need to really salt this. You can always taste it if you want to. I know, that's fine. It doesn't need any salt because the meat is seasoned ahead of time. So what we're going to do is you can see here how much of that wine has evaporated. Like this was a 1/4 cup of wine, and now it's maybe a teaspoon and a half, 2 tablespoons, or a tablespoon and a half. And we're just going to bring it over here, and we're just going to pour it on top of our meat. Now, if you wanted this thicker, you would thicken it with cornstarch or flour or whatever you want. But for just like real basic pan sauce, like I would serve this over rice, and then the rice would like soak up all the juices, and then it would just be ready to go. But that's it. Like it's very simple to brown meat. Browning veggies is very similar. Veggies have a lot more water in them, so they tend to take a little longer. And hard veggies like carrots take even longer because they're really hard. You want them to be soft. But it's the same thing. Like you add oil to your pan, you put the veggies in, you set them down. You do not f with them. You let them sit until they start to brown. And if you're using your tongs, you can like pick one up and look at it and put it back down. The key to browning is don't fuss. Do not fuss, because if you start moving things around, they're not going to brown. They're just going to cook through. You're going to have a weird temperature. You're not going to get that browning that you really, really want. So number one cardinal rule is do not mess with what you're browning. You need to let it sit there. You need to swallow that fear of it burning. You need to swallow that anxiety that you don't know how to cook, and you need to let it sit there, and you will be amply rewarded. And suddenly you're going to feel like a total kitchen goddess. But that's it. Browning is super easy, and once you learn how to brown effectively, it's really going to change your cooking.